What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Full-Time MMA, and we are here today to give our UFC 276 breakdown and predictions. Of course, we've got the middleweight champion Israel Adesanya defending his title against Jared Cannonier. We've got the featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski defending his title against Max Holloway. This will be the trilogy fight. That's an interesting story we'll talk about when we break down the fight. And of course, we've got Sean Strickland taking on Alex Pereira in a middleweight #1 contenders match. The winner of that fight will be fighting Israel Adesanya if he defends his title. And if Jared Cannonier wins, Adesanya might get a rematch. But that is a #1 contender fight, Strickland versus Pereira. We'll talk about that. There's a story behind why that's a #1 contenders fight, and we'll explain that in just a second. Also, we've got Robbie Lawler versus Brian Barbarin going down on tonight's pay-per-view. Robbie Lawler, the former welterweight champion, he's getting back into the swing of things, coming off a win over Nick Diaz. I'm looking to see if Lawler can keep that momentum going and potentially get back into title contendership. We're going to break that fight down. But of course, last but not least, the people's main event. My guy, my man, Sugar, Sean O'Malley coming to defend his undefeated title against Pedro Munoz. Oh, it's going to be a hell of a test. I cannot wait to break that fight down. I cannot wait to watch that fight. I cannot wait to see what's in store tonight. And with that being said, let's break down these fights. First, we're going to get into the main event of the evening, the number one fight of the night, the pay-per-view main event, which is the middleweight title fight between Israel Adesanya and Jared Cannonier. In that fight, Adesanya is 11-1 in the UFC. He's only lost a decision when he went up a weight class to try and become a two-division champion. He lost that fight to Jan Blachowicz, but that was not his weight class. And so that's the only fight he's lost in the UFC, and it was up a weight class. He's undefeated at middleweight, where he is the champion, and where he'll be fighting tonight. He's going against Jared Cannonier, who has fought as high as heavyweight, and he's came down to light heavyweight, and now he's fighting at middleweight. Jared Cannonier is an Alaskan fighter, but he is a monster. And we just seen Adesanya struggle when fighting up a weight class. So Jared Cannonier's bigger body frame could be a problem for Israel Adesanya, as we just seen. He lost up a weight class. Now, Cannonier's cutting down to 185. It's a little bit different. This is where Adesanya is the king. So I am going to take Israel Adesanya to win this fight. He's on another level right now, and he's also going to be the highest skilled level opponent that Jared Cannonier has fought in his career. So I think he's going to be able to keep this fight standing. He's got great takedown defense. We don't really have to worry about him getting taken down. And Adesanya, I think, is going to be able to pick Jared Cannonier apart in this fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. Next, we're moving on to Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway, the trilogy fight. It's a featherweight championship fight. Volkanovski already won the first two fights. Generally, you don't see a rematch when somebody wins two fights in a row. But the last fight was a split decision, and Max Holloway was on a 13-fight winning streak before losing to Dustin Poirier when he tried to go up a weight class. Similar to Israel Adesanya, Max Holloway tried to go up a weight class and failed. But when Max Holloway went and fought Dustin Poirier, it was a brutal beatdown, man, and it was one that, from being on a 13-fight win streak at the top of the world to taking what some people call the dirty lickings, Dustin Poirier put a pretty bad beat down on Max Holloway that's not got to affect your psyche, especially going from such a high to such a low. And it could have played a big part in why he lost to Volkanovski twice, why the blessed era may have ended when Max Holloway lost to Dustin Poirier in such a brutal fashion. With that being said, time heals all, and Max Holloway has had a lot of time in between those losses. He's picked up a couple wins since then over Yair Rodriguez and Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar is a hell of an opponent. Yair Rodriguez as well. I don't think they're on Volkanovski's level, so it's going to be hard for me to see Holloway beating Volkanovski, man. He seems to be what it takes. Max Holloway's kryptonite, and I don't want to say kryptonite because it was a split decision, but just at this point in Max Holloway's career, Volkanovski seems like a mountain that is extremely difficult to climb, and this is his last chance. So I hope Max Holloway can pull it off. Then we might see him fight again, and we might see these guys fight 5 times before all is said and done if Max Holloway wins tonight. But Volkanovski's beat him twice, And I think if Volkanovski wins tonight, which I am picking him to do, he needs to move up a weight class and try and challenge for that 155 title. I think if you beat Max Holloway 3 times and he's beat Brian Ortega and he's beat everybody that he's beat, Korean Zombie, the challengers really aren't there at featherweight anymore for Volkanovski. It's almost almost becoming like Chris Cyborg of the featherweight division. If he's able to beat Max Holloway again, he needs to move up and fight Charles Oliveira or whoever's the lightweight champion at the time that he's ready to move up. So as much as it pains me to see Max Holloway lose a potential third fight in a row as one of my favorite fighters of all time, I'm taking Alexander Volkanovski to win this fight, the featherweight championship, and maybe call out the lightweight champion. Moving on, we've got Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. This is a #1 contenders match. Sean Strickland is a monster on and off, in and out the cage. When he's on the microphone, he speaks his mind, which is refreshing. That's why he's painted as a little bit of a villain, because he said he's a cage fighter and he's not scared to say it. Hey, he says he's just as much of a piece of shit as all the other guys. They just put on a front that they don't punch people in the face. He said, but don't get it twisted. We're cage fighters and we get paid to fuck people up for a living. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like we're just the best people on the planet. And by him speaking his mind and speaking freely, whether it's on politics or whether it's on advertisers, whatever, he's gonna speak his mind and he's gonna rub some people the wrong way. So he's not gonna have politics on his side, which I can relate to. And with that being said, Sean Strickland is a hell of a character and he draws attention to himself. And he's got the skills to back it up, which you also can appreciate. His record is, as a professional fighter, 25-3. He's got 28 professional fights, 25-3. He's only lost 3 fights out of 28. He's climbing up the middleweight ranks. He doesn't lose much, and he's 1 fight away from a title fight. If he wins this fight against Alex Pereira, who's only got 6 professional MMA fights, Sean Strickland has 28 professional MMA fights. Alex Pereira has 6. Now, this is because Alex Pereira was a kickboxer. This is actually where the story comes in. He's been a kickboxer, which there's no takedowns and no jiu-jitsu. Of course, if you're newer to MMA and you don't really understand the sport, it's just strictly kickboxing, standing up, hands and feet. In kickboxing, Alex Pereira has 2 wins over the current champion, Israel Adesanya, in kickboxing. This is MMA. So, even though he's only got 6 professional fights and he's won 5 of them, his story of having 2 wins over the current champion is what propelled him to this #1 contenders fight. If Alex Pereira can beat one more person, which is Sean Strickland, then we can see if he can beat Israel Adesanya in MMA. Now, this is only Alex Pereira's 3rd fight in the UFC. I generally don't like when people get title shots after only 3 fights in the UFC, 6 fights total in their MMA career. When you have guys like Sean Strickland, guys like Max Holloway, guys like Tony Ferguson, guys like Dustin Poirier, who had to put in 26 plus fights, 20 professional fights. They had to go on 12 fight win streaks in the UFC before they even got an interim title shot in some of the cases, like Tony Ferguson. Or Usman. Kamaru Usman had to go the long route, fight 8 different fights, go undefeated in the UFC to earn his title shot. And then you've got guys like Yuri Prochazka coming in 3-4 fights in the UFC, Alex Pereira 2-3 fights in the UFC, and potentially being lined up for title fights. So the fact that they have storylines or interesting, whatever the political reason is, that they're able to jump the line, sometimes it pans out, as we just seen. Yuri Prochazka became the light heavyweight champion over Glover Teixeira. These guys, not to say they can't win, it's just to say, how do they get to the title fight? Some people are putting in the hard road, going like even Pedro Munoz and Sean O'Malley we'll talk about in a little bit. So Alex Pereira, if he wins this fight, he'd be 3 fights into UFC already getting a title fight against a guy that he's beat twice. Now, if Sean Strickland can take this guy down, which I think is how he's going to win this fight, ground and pound. He's going to get a takedown, whether it's a trip, and he's going to get on top of Pereira and make him feel what MMA is, and he's going to ground and pound him out. And I don't think Pereira's going to be able to get up because he doesn't have the skills that Adesanya has picked up, the takedown defense that Adesanya has gained to become the champion. So I think Sean Strickland wins this fight by ground and pound. Shout out to my boy Christian. Whenever we talked about this fight, he brought up the ground and pound possibility, and that's it. That's it. That's exactly how I think he's going to win this fight, ground and pound. So that's what we're going with. With that being said, I'm taking Sean Strickland to win this fight. Now we've got Robbie Lawler versus Brian Barbarin. Robbie Lawler, the former welterweight champion, lost his belt to Tyron Woodley, and since then he's been on a little bit of a skid, understandably though. With that being said, he went on a 4-fight losing streak before beating Nick Diaz in his most recent fight. Robbie Lawler just came off of a win. I'm hoping that's going to get him back in champ camp per se. That's going to get him back in championship training mode. It's going to get him back inspired. Whenever he was on a 4-fight losing streak, he was considering retirement, of course. But with that win over a high-profile fighter like Nick Diaz, I'm hoping it's going to give him the motivation and the boost to get back into the swing of things and really just hit it hard in training camp. And if he does that, if Robbie Lawler's able to just put in a really good training camp, I don't think Brian Barbarin is going to be able to beat him. Brian Barbarin, I believe, is 6-6 in the UFC. But he just hasn't fought the caliber opponents of Robbie Lawler. And when he has fought these guys, he's lost to the best guys he's fought. And the best Robbie Lawler, if Robbie Lawler trains like he did to become champion, and when he was fighting Roy McDonald, and when Robbie Lawler was on top of the world, then I don't think there's a version of Brian Barbarin currently that can beat that Robbie Lawler. And I'm hoping that's what we see here. Now, Brian Barbarina's got skills. If Robbie Lawler does not show up, Brian Barbarina can win this fight. But with that being said, I'm picking Robbie Lawler to win this fight, especially coming off of that win over a high-profile fighter like Nick Diaz. I think that's going to give him the extra motivation. It's just going to give him that boost he needs to kind of return to form. And Brian Barbarina is a good test to see if Robbie Lawler can maybe get some momentum and get back into title contention and title talks. So I'm taking Robbie Lawler to win that fight. And moving on, we're going to the people's main event. Definitely a fight I'm tuning in for. I mean, all these fights are good, but as far as the fight that I'm really tuning in and paying for the paper, why I'm buying the pay-per-view and why I'm buying wings and drinks and inviting people over, well, that's what I'm doing. Why? Because Sugar Sean O'Malley is on the card. And this is the ultimate test. I'm a little scared. I do not live in fear, but I'm telling you, I'm worried about my boy Sugar Sean O'Malley because this is a hell of a test. This is a top 10 fighter. This is a guy that has been only losing to literally the cream of the crop former champions. Pedro Munoz is 1-4 in his last 5 fights, but he's only lost to Aldo, Cruz, Sterling, fucking Peter Yan. He's only losing to the best fighters in the world. This is no give me. This is no pick me fight. No. Pedro Munoz he's beat hell of a fighter. He's been fighting the best fighters in the world since like 2018 when he fought Rob Font. And he's been fighting top 15 guys since then. Pedro Munoz is the definition of a gatekeeper to the top 5. If Sean O'Malley can beat Pedro Munoz, he is one top 5 fight away from a title shot. With all the stardom and the fans and everything that he's got, all he needs is 2 wins. One over Pedro Munoz and one over a top 5 guy, and he's getting a title shot. But he has to pass this test. O'Malley has to pass this test if he's going to get a title shot anytime soon. I'm going to be locked and loaded into this fight, man. Sugar Sean O'Malley said he's not coming in with any injuries. He understands what this fight means, and he's a very smart guy. So, I mean, it's a perfect test also because Pedro Munoz, although he's fighting the best in the world, he's losing to the best in the world. So if O'Malley can beat him, and even in a more impressive fashion than some of these former champions, it shows his capabilities. Now, this is his first top 10 test, and this is a guy who's not just any top 10. He didn't get in the top 10 by luck. Pedro Munoz earned his spot in the top 10. He is the definition of a ranked 6 to 10 fighter. There's probably nobody tougher in 6 to 10. He's like the Jimmy Rivera's and, the Aljamain Sterling before he finally got his title shot. Like, if you get matched up with Pedro Munoz, it's not an easy night. Now, if you're an elite caliber fighter, you can beat him. but he is no slouch. So it's an amazing test for Sugar Sean O'Malley. And I'm looking forward to the fight. I'm looking forward to the pay-per-view, and there's a lot of good fights on the prelims as well. So you tune in early, and you're going to have a hell of a show as well. With that being said, I got some things in the works, man. If I'm trying to start my next business, if this goes well, it's gonna involve me advertising on YouTube. So I might be getting a lot more active if this happens. But I just got to make sure that I can find people that are interested in this new business my new business venture, and you'll all understand. I'll announce it when the time comes. And with that being said, it is what it is. This is UFC 276, Adesanya versus Cannonier. 2 title fights, Sugar Sean O'Malley, Strickland versus Pereira, and of course Lawler versus Barbarin. Let's go. It is what it is, man. Let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. What are your predictions, and how do you think these guys are going to win their respective matches? Let me know. I want to hear from you. I'm out.